Hello. Right now I'm doing something I've never been able to do before. I'm shooting at high ISO in a low light environment with a Panasonic camera. I've been shooting with the Panasonic s1r, and now I'm going to tell you what I think about it. So today I'm taking a look at the Panasonic s1r. This is Panasonic's new full-frame mirrorless system. I decided to review the Panasonic s1r, which is their high-resolution camera, because they called it a hybrid camera. In other words, it's supposed to be amazing for stills and amazing for video. We're going to take a look at how it did, but first I want to give a shout out. This video is made possible by Mike's Camera, who are kind enough to make this camera available to me so that I'd be able to review it and be able to do this review, which was absolutely wonderful of them. They're a fantastic place to help out photographers and videographers for anything that we need. With that said, let's get into talking about the Panasonic s1r. Now, I chose this intentionally because I wanted to take a look at what the camera was really going to be able to do for stills and video. Panasonic has a history of being an amazing video production tool that just is not super usable for stills content. So I wanted to test that and see how they did. Well, the specs look really good. This is a 47 million pixel camera. They've removed the anti-aliasing filter, so it's razor sharp images, and I can attest that's absolutely true. The actual detail and resolving power off of this camera and the contrast that it's able to record are breathtaking. Truly wonderful image quality. You also have 9 frames a second at the top end for the stills shooting, and that's going to be a really nice high quality amount of stills to be able to produce. It's right up there with the top end frames per second rate that I would expect out of a high-end camera, which is nice. Now let's talk about the size of those files. Every raw image from this camera is about 70 megabytes. They are massive files. And as a result, there are 2 memory card slots in this camera, SD and XQD. And I'm just going to tell you right now, if you're looking at spending the, $3,700 for the camera body or the $4,600 for the camera and the lens, buy an XQD card. Buy 2 or 3, actually. These files are massive, and if you work even with a UHS-2 SDXC card, it is still going to be a slow buffering process. I experienced that multiple times while shooting with this camera when I was using SD cards. You should use SD as nothing more than backup in this camera because these are massive files. The video doesn't get any better. The video is also very large video files, which they should be, and that's even before you start taking into account using LUTs or hybrid log gamma shooting or something like that. It's just large files, which is what you want out of a really high quality camera. So that makes sense. Use the XQD cards. Now, at this point, I want to talk about the stills image capability. And that's going to be a key thing for us here because we've got to talk about the face detection. And at this point, you're going to get your first piece of bad news. I want to show you some images here. I was shooting pictures of my son in a little tunnel coming towards me using the face detection focusing mode in order to be able to pull focus on him. And it couldn't do it. The entire series was out of focus. No matter what I tried in reframing, I could not get my son's face in focus using the face detection system. Now I know that I could have used focus point selection or gone away and used the touchscreen, but I was testing the face detection and it utterly failed me. Here was my experience in a nutshell. If the subject is pretty close to you and looking right at the camera, face detection will work. But the second they're a little bit farther back and the second they turn their head slightly away, you will lose them and the camera will struggle to find your subject. It was a very disappointing experience with the face detection. So you have to be in a situation with no distracting objects. In our particular example here, the camera is actually pulling focus to the absolute side of the frame on the bolts that were in place to hold in this tunnel and the playground that he was playing in. And a face detection system should never struggle like that. So that was just not a fantastic situation at all. You need a camera operator with this guy. You can't just turn on face detection and walk away because you could lose focus at any moment with it. It was really my experience, and it doesn't make me happy to say that. But enough about the face detection. Let's look at other aspects of the focusing system. This has the Panasonic highly touted depth from defocus focusing system, right? DFD is what you're gonna see that called. This is basically a system where the camera understands the distance to a subject, which is how focus is achieved in photography, and it understands with every one of their lenses what position of the optics needs to be in place to focus to that distance at every focal length within their lenses. This is a lot of engineering effort, and it does mean they understand their lenses really, really well. And I think that the focusing speed of the camera is fast and really nice to work with. But the actual accuracy of it is really, really lacking. So when you're using this camera, especially in continuous focus mode, you're going to see subject identification boxes pop up immediately around your subjects and follow them through the frame. That doesn't mean you're actually going to pull focus on them. I had significant issues with keeping my subject in focus, in shooting continuous focus, while the subject is moving, not even necessarily that fast. So it might identify them, but the actual algorithms to keep your subject in focus or to find your subject accurately at the moment of focus was very, very frustrating. Now I'm going to show you a picture here. The actual minimum focusing distance on this lens itself is about 1.5 feet away. And so I was a little bit farther away than that for this shot, and I really wanted to take a look at what the background defocus quality of the 24-105 lens was when zoomed in but still shooting at f4. And by the way, this is not a lens review, but I actually thought it was gorgeous. I actually thought it was beautiful. However, the camera just could not find that subject, even though the subject was easily within the minimum focusing distance and there was nothing else distracting in the foreground. It just couldn't find it. I tried the touchscreen, I tried focus point selection, none of it would work. I had to go to manual focus to get that image and then use focus peaking, and of course focus peaking was perfectly accurate and I was able to get the image, but autofocus was not reliable for it. So issues with face detection, issues with keeping up with the subject, issues with finding your subject. The old Panasonic focusing system strikes again. Now, I don't want to make this a whole video about bashing the focusing system on the Panasonic camera, but if you've used the Panasonic before, just assume there are no significant changes in your actual user experience. Let's move on to some video stuff here, and at this point this is going to get a lot more positive, right? You've got UHD 4K at 60 frames a second, shooting 420 chroma compression. This is gorgeous video quality. Absolutely pristine, beautiful noise control, beautiful contrast control. I loved the color rendition off of this camera. Stills and video I thought were amazing, and it is the first time that I was able to shoot at high ISOs, 2000, 3200 ISO, and produce usable content off of a Panasonic camera. Now, of course, before they've been 4/3 sensors, and there are just limitations to what you can do in light gathering with 4/3. That's one of the reasons why Panasonic went and created this additional system, and it really is something that's quite nice. You would expect it to be for the money, of course, so it's not like you feel like, wow, I'm getting this extra surprise bonus, but you do have something that is beautiful color rendition out of the box. Immediately out of the box. Color rendition is beautiful. Low light performance was really, really nice. It was fantastic. I didn't find it outperformed the Sony a7R III, which does cost significantly less. I felt that it did outperform the Canon EOS R, and it did not outperform, to me, the Nikon Z7, but it's really close for those. Dynamic range, I felt that it was a little bit farther away, but still quite nice to work with. I felt that there were some instances shooting video where I was getting some highlight edging in my dynamic range when I shouldn't have necessarily seen it come that close to clipping. That was at least my experience with it. So dynamic range, good, but not great. Low light performance, I feel great, but not groundbreaking. Color rendition, beautiful. Video quality itself, beautiful. Absolutely no complaints. And here's a weird one for you. This is the single best built-in microphone I've ever used in my life. Now that's not a normal compliment, and normally we don't use built-in microphones, but I gotta tell you, this was actually usable audio footage outside with wind, with things happening around me. I actually thought that it was quite good, and I shot multiple clips using no microphone attachment whatsoever, and actually thought that it works well. When you pick up this camera, it's just massive. This weighs, camera body by itself, over a kilogram. And of course that's with the battery installed, but you never pick up and use the camera without the battery installed, so I've never cared about the weight without the battery. It's almost 1.7 kilograms. It's 1.696 or something like that, with the 24-105. This is a heavy camera. It feels weighty. It strains on your back a little bit. It's like shooting with a 5D3, if I'm honest with you. 5D3, 5D4, that's the kind of feel and experience that I had when shooting with this. Now, if weight's not a concern for you, then it's not a big deal. But if you've been accustomed to kind of lighter weight mirrorless, particularly if you haven't been in the full frame mirrorless world, this is going to be a surprise. It is a heavy camera. If you have shot with the EOS R or RP, that's much lighter. If you've shot with the Nikon Z7, that's much lighter. The Sony system is definitely a lighter camera body, though the lenses are going to be pretty similar. So it's a very heavy camera to carry around in and of itself, whether or not that matters to you, but it's something that you should know. Let's move on to some of the some more layout kind of things. And for a camera that I feel is still very much revolved around video, this is an awkward video placement. To actually shoot video, it's the red button right next to the viewfinder. I missed this a lot when I was shooting. I kept accidentally hitting the focus area button, which is a perfectly accurate button. It brings up an important control, but that is actually right where my thumb wants to hit. I've got to stretch to hit the video button. And so I found that to be a very awkward placement in and of itself. There's some other weird quirks in the actual button design and the actual navigation design. For instance, if you're playing back a video and you decide to delete it, you can't just hit delete and delete it. You've got to actually stop the video from playing, then hit the delete button, which is a little strange in and of itself. And also Panasonic got rid of the additional customizable buttons that were part of a touchscreen menu that they have in their GH5 and in the G9 and things like that. I actually liked it. I used that, but they have removed it in this particular camera. You still have the mode 1, mode 2, and the drive button that's up there, which actually is easy to get to, easy to be able to move. I liked that. We have a locking mechanism on the exposure dial, which is nice. I love locking mechanisms on exposure dial. White balance, ISO, exposure compensation right up top, easy to access. And I was doing some shoots with this where I had to do custom white balance regularly. Very, very easy to do, which was nice to work with. So most of the button layout makes sense. It's got a control knob, which I love, but the actual video record button is in a completely odd place, which for a camera that I feel is very video oriented is totally strange, to me at least. Now, let's talk about one last thing that's a feature in this camera. We have the lens and sensor-based stabilization system that Panasonic is known for. That is the hidden, it's not really hidden, but that is the gem of this camera. The stabilizer on this is exceptional. The best I've ever worked with, bar none. In no video content that you see at all in this video did I use a gimbal at all. Everything is handheld. Sometimes I'm walking over rocks or small divots in the ground. Sometimes I'm stepping over things in a playground. And the stabilizer in this is the single best I've ever worked with. I had no complaints. I thought it performed magic, if I'm honest with you. So unreal stabilization in this camera. So just like I like to do when I'm reviewing a lens, it's time to give this camera a totally important and not at all arbitrary rating. This is going to be in two different sections, two different categories for still imagery and for video imagery. 5 sections per category with a total of 5 possible points each, and here we go. In the still image category, we're going to start with the build quality, and I have to give this camera 5 out of 5. This is one of the best built cameras I've ever picked up. It is the single best built and high quality build feeling mirrorless camera I've ever picked up. It's solid, it's tough, it's built like a tank, it's weather sealed. I can't say enough good things about it. It's like picking up and shooting a Nikon D850 or a 5D Mark IV. That's how well built this thing feels. When we come to image quality, again, I've got to give it 5 out of 5. I know that I said it's not groundbreaking in low light performance, but it's still spectacular. It doesn't break new ground in dynamic range, but it's still spectacular. This is unbelievably high image quality directly off of the sensor. You have to do very little with your images in order to get them to really pop for you, and color rendition out of the camera is just spectacular. Focus speed is going to be 3 out of 5. It didn't blow my mind, but it's absolutely adequate and workable for all the purposes I'd want to use this camera for. I don't feel this is a camera that I'm going to take shooting wildlife or action sequences, but anything else, it is perfectly serviceable. However, on the flip side of that is going to be our tracking. I have to give it a 1 out of 5. It would utterly failed me every time that I tried to utilize the actual intelligence and subject tracking modes. So that means value for money. I have to give it a 2 out of 5. It's a spectacular camera, but in the end, it's pretty pricey and has a woefully underperforming focusing system. A focusing system, I would say, out of a $1,000 camera rather than a $3,600 camera. Moving on to the video quality, we're going to start with low light. I've got to give it a 5 out of 5 for the exact same reason I gave image quality 5 out of 5. No, it's maybe the 3rd best camera I've shot with in low light, but that still is absolutely wonderful and truly breaking new ground for me using a Panasonic camera. Size and weight is going to be the opposite, 1 out of 5. This camera is big, it's heavy, it's bulky, and it's a big camera in a mirrorless world, and that's going to be an awkward position for it to be in. Next is going to be video quality, 5 out of 5. I would give it 6 or 7 out of 5 if I allowed myself to. This is a spectacular video tool. I think that's where it really is going to shine. That means growth potential for this camera is also going to be 5 out of 5. You pick up this camera, there is nothing, particularly in video production, that you will not be able to accomplish. Whatever your particular goal is, this camera system will be able to assist you and be able to make you successful, and that's a really big deal. Video features and features generally, again, I've got to give it 5 out of 5. It has every single video feature you could possibly want in it. Panasonic is known for that. And on top of it, it is the single best stabilizing system I have ever worked with. Now, at this point, I like to give my impression on what I enjoyed or what I liked using it. And that for me is whether or not it gets an additional point for dopeness, which this camera certainly does not. It's just too big and clunky for me to feel that I was going to give it that little bit of personal endorsement. But that still means it's going to get 37 out of 50 total points, and frankly, that's a really good place to be. Now, this is the first camera I've ever reviewed, so we'll see how this stacks up, but I think that's going to be a high score for some time. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the Panasonic S1R. This camera is the single best video production tool that is at the consumer level today. Absolutely incredible, best stabilizer I've ever worked with, best video quality I've ever worked with, and color rendition is out of this world, as is low light performance, image quality, dynamic range. Really something special if you can get past the focusing system and the size and weight. That's it for me today, but if there's something I forgot to talk about or something you wanted to mention, get into the comments. I'd love to hear about it. And of course, I'm gonna ask you to like and subscribe. It's free, you knew that, and thank you so much for taking your time to watch. I'll see you next time.